Why, if it isn't Millie Fritzman, a deep, booming voice said. In the darkness, it was hard to tell exactly where it was coming from, but it felt like it was around her. Silly Millie, chilly Millie, the ice-cold goth girl who always dreamed of death. Am I right? Who are you? Millie demanded. Why, where are you? Above her, a large pair of terrifying blue eyes rolled backwards, looking down into the chamber. I'm right here, silly Millie. Or maybe I should say, you're right here. You're right inside my belly. In the belly of the beast, I guess you could say. So, you're the bear? Millie wondered if she had fallen asleep after she climbed inside the old robot. If she was dreaming. This was all too weird. You can just think of me as a friend. A friend till the end. We just have to decide if the end is going to slow or quick. I, I don't understand. The space was starting to feel claustrophobic. She tried the door. It wouldn't budge. You'll understand very soon, Chilly Millie. You've goth girls crack me up. All dressed like professional moaners. So serious all the time, daydreaming about death like he was the lead singer of some boy band. That when you meet him, it'll be love at first sight. Well, Merry Christmas, Millie. I'm going to make your dreams come true. It's not a question of if, but how. What was happening? She was definitely awake. Had she lost her mind, descending into madness like a character in an Edgar Allan Poe story? I'd like to get out now, she said, her voice sounding small and shaky. Nonsense, the voice said. You're going to stay in here, all nice and cozy, while we work out how you're going to have your dream date with death. The choice is yours, but it will be my pleasure to present you with some options. Options of how to die? Millie felt a cold, metallic taste of fear in the back of her throat. Fantasizing about death were one thing, but it felt like reality. Millie, what a stupid name. She was named after her great-grandmother, Milson Fitzsimmons. But Millie wasn't the kind of name you sadly a person with. A cat or dog maybe, but not an actual human. Millie's black cat was named Annabelle Lee after the beautiful dead girl in the Edgar Allan Poe poem, which meant was that Millie's cat officially had a better name than she did. But Millie thought it made sense that her parents would come up with such a ridiculous name. She loved them, but they were ridiculous people in a lot of ways. Finally, and in particular, the kind of people who would never think how hard elementary school would be for a little girl whose name rhymed with silly. Her parents flit from job to job, from hobby to hobby, and now, it seems, from country to country. Over the summer, Millie's dad had been offered a 1 year teaching a job at Saudi Arabia. Her mom and dad had given her a choice. She could go with them. It'll be an adventure, her mom keeps saying, and be homeschooled. Or she could move in with her kooky grandpa for the year and start with a local high school. Talk about a lost situation. After lots of crying and raging and sulking, Millie had finally chosen the kooky grandpa option over being stranded in a foreign country with her well-meaning but unreliable parents. And so now Millie was here in her strange little room with Grandpa's big, strange Victorian house. She had to admit, the idea of living in an old, spiraling 150-year-old house, where surely someone had to have died at some point, suited her well enough. The only problem was that it was filled to the brim with her grandparents' junk. Millie's grandpa was a collector. Lots of people have collections. Of course, comic books or gaming cards or action figures. But Grandpa didn't collect a specific type of thing so much as accumulate a lot of different things. He was definitely a collector, but a collector of what? Millie wasn't sure. It all seemed very random. Looking around the living room, she could see old license plates and handcuffs hanging on one wall, old baseball bats and tennis rackets on another. A life-size suit of armor stood guard on one side of the front door, and a mangled-looking Tamarixy bobcat stood at the other side, its mouth open and fangs bared in a menacing fashion. One glass case in the living room containing nothing but old Petulant baby dolls with tiny teeth and staring glass eyes. They were creepy, and Millie tried to stay away from them, though she still showed up sometimes in her nightmares, with those little teeth chomping at her. Her new bedroom had been her grandma's sewing room. It would still contain an old sewing machine, even though her grandma had died before Millie was born. Grandpa had moved the narrow bed and dresser to accommodate Millie and her belongings, and she tried to make the room her own. She dabbed the bedside lamp with a sheer black lacy scarf so it covered off a muted glow. She covered the dresser with dimming candles, and she hung posters of Kurt Kersen, her favorite singer, on the walls. In one poster, the cover designed of his album Rigor Mortis. Kurt's lips were packed black and revealed a set of metal fangs. A perfect red bled of blood glistening on his chin. The trouble was, though, that no matter how much Millie tried to match the room decor to her personality, it never quite worked. The sewing machine was there, and the wallpaper was cream-colored and decorated with tiny pink rosebuds. Even with Kurt Kissen's fangs glowing on the wall, there was something about the room that seemed sweet and old ladyish. "Soup's on!" Grandpa called from the bottom of the stairs. This is how he always announced dinner, and yet he had never once served soup. "I'll be there in a minute," Millie yelled back, not really caring whether she ate dinner or not. She dragged herself out of the room and made her way downstairs slowly, trying not to bump into or trip over any of the culture that seems to fill every square inch of space in the house. Millie met Grandpa in the dining room, where the walls were decorated with souvenir plates printed on names and landmarks of different states he had visited with Grandma when she was alive. The opposite wall displayed replicas of antique swords. Millie wasn't sure what those were about. Grandpa was every bit as weird as his collections. His skispy gray hair was messy and wild, and he always wore the same randomly Kent garden. He looked like he could hack a wacky inventor in the old movie. "Dinner is served, madame," Grandpa said, setting a bowl of mashed potatoes on the table. Millie sat at her place at the table and surveyed the visual disgusting meal. Mushy-looking meatloaf, instant mashed potatoes, and cream spinach that she knew had been packed and frozen in a solid block until he zapped it in the microwave. It was a meal you could eat even if you didn't have teeth, which Millie supposed went with the tyranny of having an old person to cook for you. Millie loaded her plate with mashed potatoes since they were the only edible thing on the table. "Now make sure you get some meatloaf and spinach, too," Grandpa said, passing her a bowl of greens. "You need the iron. You always look so pale." "I like being pale." Millie wore a sheer light powder to make her face look even paler in contrast to the black eyeliner and black clothing she favored. "Well," Grandpa said, helping himself with a meatloaf, "I'm glad you don't bake yourself in the sun like your mother did when she was your age. Still, you could use a little color in your cheeks." He held out a pat of meatloaf to her. "You know, I don't eat meat, Grandpa. Meat was gross and also murder." "Eat some spinach, then," Grandpa said, spooning some on her plate. "Plenty of iron in it. You know, back when I learned to do a little bit of cooking, I can manage. It was all about meat. Meatloaf, steak, roast beef, pork chops. But if you help me find some vegetable recipes, I'll sure try to cook them. It would probably be better for my health to eat less meat anyways." Millie sighed and pushed the spinach around in her plate. "Don't bother. It doesn't really matter whether I can eat or not." Grandpa sat down his fork. "Of course it matters. Everyone's got to eat." He shook his head. "There's no pleasing you, is there, girlie? I'm trying to be nice and figure out what you like. I want you to be happy here." Millie pushed her plate away. "It's a waste of energy to try to make me happy. I'm not a happy person, and you know what? I'm glad I'm not happy. Happy people are just lying to themselves." "Well, if there's nothing in store for you but misery, I guess you might as well go start on your homework," Grandpa said, and he ate his last bite of mashed potatoes. Millie rolled her eyes and flounced out in the room. Homework was a misery. School was a misery. Her whole life was a misery. In her miserable room, Millie opened her laptop and searched for famous poems about death. She reread her old favorites. Annabel Lee, the cat with the same name, was curled up in her bed, and The Raven by Poe, and tried one she'd never seen before by Emily Dickinson. The poem talked about death as a guy picking up a girl for a date. A date with death? The thought made Millie light-headed. She thought of death as a handsome, black-cloaked stranger, choosing her as the one she would take away from the boredom and misery of everyday life. She imagined she looked just like Kurt Carson. Inspired, she grabbed her black letter journal and began to write. "Oh, death, show me your revered face. Oh, death, how I long for your chilling embrace. Oh, death, my life is a misery. Only you can set me free." She knew poems didn't have to rhyme, but Edgar Allan's Poe and Emily Dickinson's rhyme, so she rhymed her poem too. Not bad, she decided. Sighing with dread at what lay before her, she closed her journal and took out her homework. Algebra. What use was algebra in the face of human beings' inevitable immortality? None. Well, none except that she didn't pass all her class. Her parents would cut off the allowance that her grandpa doled out to her every week, and she was saving up for more jet-burning jewelry. She opened her algebra book, picked up her pencil, and began. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. "What?" Millie snapped and slammed her book shut, as if she'd been interrupted doing something she actually enjoyed. Grandpa nudged the door open with his foot. He was carrying a glass of milk and a plate of Fedrin chocolate chip cookies. "I thought you might need a little study fuel," he said. "I know, chocolate always did the trick for me." "Grandpa, I'm not a little kid anymore," Millie said. "You can't buy me happiness with a few cookies." "Okay," Grandpa said, still holding the plate. "You want me to take them away then?" "No," Millie said quickly. "Leave them." Grandpa shook his head, smiled a little, and set the plate and the glass on Millie's bedside table. "I'm going to putter around in my workshop for an hour or so, girlie," he said. "Call me if you need anything." "I won't need anything," Millie said, turning back into her algebra homework. She waited until she was sure that he was gone, and devoured the cookies. Options of how to die, exactly. The voice in the darkness said, "You're catching on now, girl, that you are. Now, I'll call the first couple options the lazy choices. They don't require me to do anything but keep you here and let nature take its course. The advantage to this is that they're easy peasy for me, but not so easy for you. Slow, with lots of suffering, but who knows? That might appeal with you morbid sensibility. Lots of opportunities for land gushing. You like land gushing? What do you mean? Millie asked. Whatever the answer was, she knew she wasn't going to like it. Dehydration is one option, the voice said. No water at all, and you could start dying in a few as 3 days. Or as many as 7. You're young and healthy, so I put my money on it'd take you a while. Depriving the body of water is a fascinating effect. With no fluids coming in flitter and flush, the kidneys shut down and your body start poisoning itself, making you sicker and sicker. Once those poisons have time to build up, you could suffer total organic failure and a heart attack or a stroke. But that's death for you. So glamorous, so romantic. Are you making fun of me? The voice that came out of Millie's was tiny and soft. The voice of a scared little girl. Not at all, my dear. I like you, Millie. And that's why I'm here to make your wishes come true. Like a genie, except you're the one who's trapped in a bottle. The voice stopped to chuckle. Starvation's another classic, too. But that's really a slow-moving train. It takes weeks for a body to use its storage of nutrition and break down all of its proteins and turn on itself. It could take weeks. Some people have even lasted a couple of months. Millie knew her grandpa would rescue her before she could starve to death. That never worked. Grandpa comes in here with a platter around after dinner every night. He'll find me. How? The voice asked. He'll hear me if in here. I'll scream. Scream all you want, Lamb Chop. It's soundproof. No one will hear you. And anyway, after a few days, you'll be too weak to scream. Winter break was just 1 week away, and the whole school was decorated with wreaths, Christmas trees, and occasional men of fray. Millie didn't know why people got so excited over holidays. They were just a desperate attempt to invent some happiness in the face of life's other meaningfulness. Well, they couldn't fool her. People could wish her Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays until they turned Santa Claus red in the face, but she wouldn't say it back. Not that people were going out of their way to wish Millie well. As she walked down the halls in the lunchroom, one blonde cheerleader, Millie didn't even know her name, said, "I'm surprised to see you out of the daylight, Dracula's daughter." The cheerleader looked over at her equally blonded friends, whom she'd been talking to more than she actually been talking to Millie, and they all laughed. The Dracula's daughter thing had started because she'd been carrying around a paperback copy of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and one of the jockey popular guys had said, "Oh, look, how sweet, she's reading a book about her dad." From then on, she'd been Dracula's daughter. Of course, everyone knew she was really Jeff and Andries Fitzsimmons' daughter, which made her almost as much as a misfit as she would have been if Dracula were her real dad. The Fitzsimmons were kind of a joke in the town, famous for their tendency to start projects with great enthusiasm and then abandon them. They had body run down, but once beautiful colonial house when Millie was 10 and had thrown themselves into furbishing it. They had keep it for about 3 months until they ran out of time, money, and energy. As a result, the house had a weird patchwork quality. The living room and the kitchen were repainted and had new fixtures, but the bedrooms were still in old peeling wallpaper and floors were squeaky boards. The bathroom pipes screamed when you turn on the water, and the ancient tub, sink, and toilet never looked clean no matter how much they were scrubbed. The most talked about thing, though, was the exterior of the house. Millie's dad had repainted the front and one side of nice soft blue with cream trim. But paint was expensive. Painting was exhausting, and he really didn't like getting up the ladder. As a result, the front of the house was painted beautifully, but the back and other side were still the old flaky white paint. Millie's mom said nobody would notice. It was like when people arranged the Christmas tree so that the ugly side faced the wall. People noticed. People also noticed the Fitzsimmons' inability to keep a steady job. Millie's parents were always coming up with some new scheme that finally was going to bring them success of their dream. One year, her mom was making candles and selling them to the farmer's market, while her dad started a nutrition supplement store that closed its doors after 6 months. After that, her mom and dad started a store that sold yarn and knitting supplies, and then they might have made a go of it if either of her parents had known about yarn and knitting. Then, they bought a food truck, even though they were both terrible cooks. Millie couldn't understand how her parents could remain so obstinate with failure after failure, but they did. They attacked each new project with huge enthusiasm, and then after a few months, both the project and the enthusiasm fizzled out. They weren't poor, exactly. There was always food to eat, even if towards the end of the month it tended a dill to pancake mix and boxed macaroni and cheese, but there were always worries about how the bills wouldn't get paid. Millie knew that her grandpa helped them out some months. Her grandpa was also considered weird in town, but was cut some slack because he was old and a widower, and had been an excellent high school math teacher for many years. As a result, he earned the title of extraordinary instead of weird. Some people said that maybe by taking this teaching job to Saudi Arabia, Jeff was finally getting it together and following in his dad's footsteps. Millie knew, though, that her dad would frizzle away this opportunity like he had so many others. So Dracula's daughter or Jeff and Andrew's daughter, either one was a one-way ticket of being a social outcast. In the cafeteria, Millie took a second to adjust to the defending din of hundreds of teenagers talking and laughing. She walked past a table full of popular girls and saw her best friend from elementary school, Hannah, sitting with them laughing at something all the other girls were laughing about. Millie and Hannah had been inseparable from kindergarten through 5th grade, playing on the swings or jumping rope together every recess and playing dolls or board games at each other's house after school. But in middle school, popularity started to be more and more important to Hannah. She drifted away from Millie and towards the crowd who was always giggling about clothes and boys. What Millie understood, but Hannah did not, was that those girls never accepted Hannah as more than a hanger-on. Hannah lives in a plain little house in a plain little neighborhood and didn't have enough money or social status to make the cut. Those popular girls didn't push her away, but they never let her in the inner circle either. It made Millie sad that Hannah preferred to accept crumbs from a popular girls rather than a real friendship from her. But then a lot of things made Millie sad. Millie sat alone, nibbling on an egg salad sandwich and apple slices her grandpa had packed for her and reading tales of mystery imagination. She was managing to drown out all the cafeteria noise and focus on the story she was reading, The Fall of the House of Usher. Roderick Usher. The main character in the story couldn't bear noise of any kind, but then she felt herself being watched. She looked up from her work to see a lanky boy with horn-rimmed glasses and frizzled hair that had been dyed fire engine red. Both his ears were studded with a silver earring. Millie covered his black leather jacket. Hi, I was wondering, he nodded at the chair across from Millie. Is anyone sitting there? Was this guy asking to sit with her? Nobody ever asked her with her. My imaginary friend, Millie said. Wait, was that a joke? She never joked with people. The boy grinned, revealing a mouthful of braces. Well, would your imaginary friend mind if I sit in her lap? Millie looked at the empty chair for a second. She said, Suit yourself. Okay, he said, setting his tray down. Thanks, to both of you. I don't really know anyone yet. I'm new. Nice to meet you, new. I'm Millie. What? Was she a comedian now? My name's Dylan, actually. I just moved here from Tidello. He gestured towards her book. His fingernails were short but polished black. A Poe fan, huh? Millie nodded. Me too, Dylan said. And H.P. Lovecraft. I love all old scary writers. I never read Lovecraft, Millie said. Better to be honest than to try to fake knowledge and talk herself into a corner. I've heard of him, though. Oh, you love him, Dylan said, dunking a cafeteria-issued chicken nugget in a puddle of ketchup. Super dark and twisted. He looks around the cafeteria, his face a mask of dissonance. So is this school as lame as it seems? Lamer, Millie said, marking her place in the book and shutting in. The house of Usher wasn't going anywhere, and she couldn't remember what she had an interesting conversation. Well, I'll tell you what, Dylan said, gesturing with a french fry. So far, you're the only person I've ever seen who seems cool. Millie felt her face heating up. She hoped a blush wouldn't pink in her paunch. Thanks, she said. I like your jacket. And I like your earrings. She reached up to touch one of the black teardrops that dangled from his earlobes. Thanks. They're jet Victorian mourning jewelry. I know, Dylan said. He knew? What kind of high school guy knew about Victorian mourning jewelry? I have a few pieces of it, Millie said. I mostly find them on eBay. I couldn't afford my favorite kind, though, which is... Dylan pulled and said, Wait, don't tell me. It's the kind that where they leave the hair of the dead people into the jewelry, right? Yes, Millie said, shook in amaze. Those pieces shows up sometimes on eBay. They always cost a fortune. The bell rang, signaling that lunch period was about to end. Dylan leaned towards Millie and half whispered, Do not ask for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee, Millie finished. Where had this guy come from? Tilly, sure, but how was he so omniscient and knowledgeable? She had never met anyone like him. Dylan stood up. Millie, it's been a rare pleasure. Would you and your imaginary friend mind very much if I joined you two at lunch tomorrow? Millie felt a corner of her mouth twitch with the unfamiliar way. We wouldn't mind at all, she said. See? I had thought about freezing you to death, too, the voice said. I thought I could short out the power in here, so the space heater returns off and my metal body can get pretty cold. But I figured your grandpa would come in and notice the power was out in his precious workshop and would fix it right away. So freezing to death is a no-go. Sorry if you had your heart set on that one, Sweet Pea. Millie was shivering not from the cold, but from fear. I don't understand. Why do you want to kill me? Interesting you should ask, the voice said. There are a couple of reasons, actually. The first is quite simple, that it's something to do. I sat in a salvage yard for ages before your grandpa found me and brought me in, where I've just been sitting too. I'm bored out of my skull. Not that I have a literal skull, but you know what I meant. Aren't there other things you could find to do besides killing people? Millie asked, whatever this being was. It was obviously intelligent. Maybe she could reason with it. Nothing so interesting. And plus, there's a second reason, which is that death is what you want. You've been mooning around since you moved here, talking about how you want to die. Well, I like to kill people, and you want to die. It's a mutual benefit relationship, like those little birds that pick the parasites of rhinoceros. The bird gets to eat, and the rhinoceros gets rid of the itchy little bugs. We both get what we want. Win-win. Millie suddenly realized that she had spoken of death, written about it, but it had always been just an interesting idea to play around with. She never intended to take any action to make it a reality. But I don't want to die. Not really. A horrible rumbling sound surrounded Millie and shook the body of the machine that trapped her. It took her a few seconds to recognize the sound as laughter. For dinner, Grandpa made spaghetti, a marinara sauce, garlic bread, and Caesar salad. It was much better than the meals he usually slanged together. You're actually eating tonight? Grandpa said, because it's actually good, they said, twirling spaghetti in her fork. All right, I finally found something you like to eat, Grandpa said. I'll add it to my limited reportion. I kept the sauce meatless for you and add meatballs to mine. So everyone's happy. Herbivores and carnivores alike. Well, happy may be stretching it, Millie said, unwilling to admit that she actually had a kind of good day. But the spaghetti's good, and my day at school didn't totally stink. And what made that day less stinky than usual? Grandpa asked, staring at Meatball. I met someone who seems kind of cool. Really? A girl someone or a boy someone? Millie didn't like Grandpa's insistent tone. Well, not that it matters, but it happens to be a boy. Don't try to turn it into some kind of love story, though. We just had a decent conversation is all. A decent conversation is something, especially these days. Most people our age won't look up from their phones and long enough to say as much as how do you do, Grandpa said. Not to put a cart before the horse, but I met your grandma when I was just a little older than you are now. So what, now you have me engaged to this guy I just met, Grandpa? I'm 14. Grandpa laughed. You're right that you're much too young to be engaged, and your grandma and I didn't get engaged when we were teenagers either. But we were high school sweethearts, and then we went to the same college. We got engaged our senior year of college and married in June right after we graduated. He smiled. And it all started with a good conversation at lunch, like you had today, so you never know. Slow down, old man, Millie said, fighting off the smile. Grandpa's eyes went soft and misty. I just reminisce I wish you could have known your grandma, Millie. She was really something special. And to lose her when she wasn't even 40. It's like Annabel Lee, Millie said. The Poe poem? Grandpa asked. It was many and many years ago in a kingdom by the sea. Yes, I guess it's something like that. You know Poe? Millie asked. It went weird to hear him recite one of his favorite poems. Grandpa was a math person. He didn't expect him to know everything about poetry. Believe it or not, I'm a pretty literal old dude. I like Poe and a lot of other writers too. I know you like Poe because he's dark and spooky, and it's easy to romanticize death when you're young and it's so far away. But Poe didn't write about death because he thought it was romantic. He wrote it because he lost so many of the people he loved. You'll never experience that kind of loss, Millie. It changes you. He blinked hard. You know, for years after she died, friends were always trying to fix me up with other girls, but it never worked. She was the only one for me. Millie had never really thought about Grandpa's feelings before. How he must have felt when Grandma got sick and died. How lonely he must have been after she was gone. How he might still be lonely now. That must have been hard, she said, losing Grandma. Grandpa nodded. It was. I still miss her every day. Well, thanks for dinner, Millie said. I guess I better get started on my homework. Without being asked, Grandpa said, smiling. This is certainly a special day. In her room, Millie didn't think of death. She thought of Dylan, and she thought about what Grandpa had said about Grandma. When we recite Annabel Lee in her head this time, it seemed like a poem about love instead of a poem of death. Silly Millie. For someone who doesn't want to die, you sure spend a lot of time talking about it. The voice surrounded her head. But that's the way of things, isn't it? Talk is always easier than action. I think, Millie said, sniffing, that when I said I wanted to die, what I really wanted was to escape. I didn't want death. I just wanted my life to be different. Oh, but that really takes action, doesn't it? The voice said. Changing a life for the better, especially when the world is such a mean, rotten place. It's much easier, and ultimately, much more satisfying, just to snuff it out. Which brings me to my second set of options, much more interesting ones. These are quick and easy for you for the most part, but they require a little more effort from me. I'm not complaining though. There's nothing like more than a good challenge to relieve my boredom. Say, you like Dracula, don't you? Millie could barely find her voice to answer. Why, are you gonna bite my neck? Now how would I do that with you in my belly, silly girl? I know you're a Dracula fan. The kids at school call you Dracula's daughter, don't they? Well, What you might not know is that the character of Dracula was inspired by a real person, a prince named Vlad Dracula, but he's better known by his nickname, Vlad the Impaler. Millie's insides seemed to turn into jelly. Vlad killed thousands of his enemies, but his crowning achievement was creating a forest of the impaled, where thousands of his victims, men, women, and children, were squirrel stacks driven into the ground. Now I'm no prince, and I can't aspire to that level of achievement, but one little golden payment can be that hard, can it? I can just take one of my metal rods and drive it through my body cavity, and it'll go straight through you, and not the other way. If the spike goes through your vital organs, death comes quickly. If it doesn't, then there can be some hours of bleeding and suffering. The people who walk through the forest of the impalement talk about the moaning and gasping of the victims. So, impaling! One might say other deaths impale in comparison. The voice tone was cheery. It can work quickly or slowly, but the result is the same in the end. Like I said, win-win. No, Millie whispered. She wanted her mom and dad. She wanted her grandpa. They would help her if they only knew. She even settled for goofy Uncle Rob and Aunt Sherry as long as they would come to her rescue. She would even put on a Christmas sweater if it made them happy. Millie sat on her table at the cafeteria expectantly. She had taken special care of her appearance this morning, choosing a lackey black top and a jet Victorian mourning necklace from her small collection. Her face powder excessed her pallor, and her black eyeliner had the perfect cat-like effect. A minute passed, she started to worry. What if Dylan didn't show up? What if she had gotten all dressed up for nothing? What if, as she always expected, life offered no possibility of pleasure or happiness? But then there he was, with his leather jacket and fire-engine red hair, and shiny silver earrings. "Hey," Millie said, trying not to sound like she was too happy to see him. "Hey," he said, setting his tray on the table and sitting across from her. "I brought you something." Millie's heart pounded with excitement. She hoped she didn't show it. He reached in his pocket of his leather jacket and pulled out a worn paperback book. H.P. Lovecraft, he said. "I was telling you about him yesterday." "I remember," Millie said, taking the book. "The Call of Cthulhu and Other Stories." "Did I say it right? Cthulhu?" "Who knows?" he said. "H.P. Lovecraft made it up, and he's dead, so we can't ask him. You can keep the book. I got a copy in hardcover on my birthday." He grinned. "My parents are cool. They don't mind if I like weird stuff." "Thanks." She felt a little smile creeping on her face. She slipped the book in her bag. She would certainly read the book, but it wasn't the book itself that made her feel all smiley. It was that Dylan had thought of her. While he was at home, not in her presence, he had thought of her, found the book, put it in his jacket pocket, and remembered to give it to her. In her experience, boys aren't usually this thoughtful. After dinner, in her room, Millie started reading the H.P. Lovecraft book. Dylan was right. It was weird. Weird and Poe stuff. Even, and scary in a way that made feel like spiders were crawling beneath her skin. But she loved it. It was the perfect gift for Dylan to give her. Millie wasn't a flowers and candy kind of girl. After she read a couple of stories, she opened her laptop instead of Googling poems about death. She searched for poems about love. She found a famous one by Elizabeth Barrett Browning that began, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." She had read the poem before and thought of it just as pretty words, but now she could appreciate the feelings behind the words. Strong feelings for the rare person who truly understood you, and whom you understood in return. She took out her black letter journal, drew out her pen, and thought. Finally she wrote, "You chipped away the black thorny vines that twisted around my wounded heart, so it could beat and feel relief from pain. You are the garden who wakes the plants from the gray chilly death of winter, so that they can blossom again like my heart, a slow blooming blood-red rose." She read the poem back to herself and sighed in satisfaction. Her mood only darkened slightly when she set her journal aside to start on her homework. No, pity. I always find Palm has a certain dramatic flair. Perhaps something with a little more zing. Electrocution is always a faction opinion. Did you know the idea of electric chair was developed in the 18s, by the dentist named Alfred P. Southwick? He came up with the idea with the electric chair based on his dental chair. That's not exactly comfortable to people with dental phobia, now is it? I don't have a chair to strap you into, but I do have the power to shoot a series of strong electrical currents through my body cavity. If a current zaps your heart or brain, you'll die quickly. If it doesn't, you'll have some nasty burns and your heart will go into liberation, which will guarantee kill you if you don't have help. And I think we already established that you have anyone here to help you. Help was a word Millie wanted desperately to scream, but she knew it was a waste of energy. Energy she needed to conserve if she had any hope to survive. So what do you think, Cupcake? Electrocution? You'll be shocked at how effective it is. A electrifyingly good time. Another chuckle. Millie had once experienced a shock unplugging a hair dryer from a wall socket in a badly wired hotel room. She had felt the electrifying tear painfully up her arm, and for a few moments was out of breath if someone had punched her in the stomach. She didn't want to think about how an electrifying current strong enough to kill her would feel. A good time for you, but not for me, she said. On Saturday afternoon, when most other kids were at the mall or in the movies or hanging out with one another's houses, Millie was walked downtown to the public library. It was about a 20-minute walk, so to walk there and back with an hour or two of browsing and reading sandwiched in between was a pleasant way to spend a Saturday afternoon in solitude. Today she roamed the library stacks looking for a suitable dark reading material. She had finished The Call of Cthulhu and was disappointed that there weren't any more books by Lovecraft on the shelves. "Hey," a voice called behind her. She gasped and jumped, and then saw it was Dylan. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said. "Hey, did you read a Lovecraft book?" Millie couldn't believe that the stars have aligned such that she could run into Dylan outside of school. "Yes, I loved it. I was kind of hoping they have more stuff of him here." "Hmm," Dylan said. "I bet I can pick up something else you'll like. Give me a sec." With a thoughtful expression, he scanned the shelves, then pulled out a thin book with a black cover and handed it to her. "The Lottery and Other Stories by Shirley Jackson," she's read. "Yep, you'll love her. It was a perfect book to continue your classic horror pursuits." "Hey," he said, "I was reading that at that table over there until I saw you. If you want to sit there and read, too, you can." "Okay." Millie worked hard not to show how happy this invitation made her. "I've got to admit, I got ulterior motive inviting you," Dylan said. "I want to see that look on your face once you finish reading the first short story in the book." They sat at a table across from each other and read in companionable silence. Millie loved talking with Dylan, but being quiet with him was nice too. She read The Lottery with a growing feeling of suspense, and when she got into the ending, Dylan laughed. "You're reading within your mouth hanging open," he said. "It's the ultimate surprise ending, isn't it?" "It really is." "Say," Dylan said, "I was thinking that after I check out my books, I might have a cup of tea at the cafe next door. Would you like to do that too? I mean, you don't have to drink tea just because I do. You can have coffee or hot chocolate." "Tea sounds fine," Millie said. This afternoon was turning out to be a nice, surprisingly so. Millie had passed you and me coffee and tea hundreds of times, but had never gone inside. It was a pleasant place, with exposed bricks displaying painting by local artists. Sitting with Dylan over their steaming cups, Millie said, "I think I might like to be a librarian someday." She had never told anyone about this before. She'd always been afraid of getting laughed at. "That would be cool," Dylan said. "You love books." "I like books. And I love quiet," Millie said, sipping her Earl Grey tea. "You should totally dress into a goth librarian style, too," Dylan said. "You could put your hair up and wear your jet jewelry with a black Victorian dress and those old-fashioned glasses that just chip on your nose. What are they called?" "Pinsy?" Dylan grinned. "Yeah, those. And when you dress like that and touch people in the library, it'll scare the living daylights out of them." Millie laughed, and she had to admit, it felt good. School days were better when she knew she had lunch with Dylan. She could spend the morning looking forward to seeing him, and the afternoon thinking about what they'll say to each other. Sometimes she felt like a little silly for spending too much time thinking about a boy, but Dylan wasn't just an ordinary boy. Today, when she got home from school, her grandpa met her in the company living room. "I thought we might go to school holiday bazaar tonight," he said, instead of this usual cabernet. He was wearing an ugly green pulled-over sweater decorated with creepy smile Christmas trees. "The holiday bazaar is stupid," Millie rolled her eyes. "Just a bunch of people selling ugly Christmas tree ornaments made out of popsicle sticks." "Oh, I always thought the bazaar was kind of fun when I was a teacher. This year there's a chili supper, and you can choose between meat or vegetarian chili. And there's an all-you-can-eat cookie buffet." Think about those words for a minute, Millie. He paused dramatically. "All-you-can-eat cookie buffet." "You really done your homework on this, haven't you?" Millie said. She could never say it out loud, but it was kind of cute how excited Grandpa was. "I have. I take cookies very seriously." "I can see that," Millie sighed. "Maybe just this one time she could let the old man have something he wanted. The two of them didn't get out much, and it might be good for him to be among other people." "Okay, I guess I'll go, even if it's not my thing." "Great!" Grandpa said. "We'll leave in about an hour." He looked her up and down. "Maybe you could wear something besides black? Something, a little more festive?" "Don't push it, Grandpa," Millie said. She couldn't believe she agreed to attend such a lame event. But maybe Dylan would be there, under duress like her, and they could make fun of it together. The school halls were sparkly with Christmas lights. And Millie had been correct in predicting the ugliness of ornaments for sale. But the vegetarian chili was tasty, and there was an impressive variety of cookies on the cookie buffet, including gingerbread, which was her favorite. After she and Grandpa ate their fill, she wandered the hallways, giving the impression of looking at the craft displays, but really looking for Dylan. She found him in the second floor hallway, but not in the way she wanted to. Dylan was standing in front of a booth selling reindeer Christmas ornaments made out of candy canes, but he wasn't alone. He was with Brooke Harrison, a blandly pretty blonde girl who was in Millie's U.S. government class. Dylan and Brooke were holding hands and laughing at some private jokes in a very couplish way. Millie bit her lip to keep from gasping, turning around and ran through the hall and down the stairs. She had to find Grandpa. She had to get out of here. "Where's the fire, Dracula's daughter?" some random kid asked her. She didn't even bother to pursue who it was. They were all the same anyway. She ran into the cafeteria, scanning the crowd for Grandpa's ugly Christmas sweater. Unfortunately, a lot of people were wearing ugly Christmas sweater. She finally found Grandpa next to the drinks table, sipping coffee and chatting with a couple of other old men who were also retired teachers. These guys apparently shop at the same ugly Christmas sweater store as Grandpa. "We have to go," Millie hissed at him. Grandpa knit his brow in concern. "Are you sick or something?" "No, I just have to go." Why would he move faster? "Okay, honey." He gave the other guys a look that seemed to say, "They're so emotional at this age." And then he said, "See you later, fellas. Merry Christmas." In the car, Millie said, "What's the matter, honey? Did someone at school say something that hurt your feelings?" Millie couldn't believe her grandpa could be so stupid. "Nobody at school said anything to me because nobody at school ever says anything to me. Nobody at this school cares whether I live or die." She sniffed a sob and wiped under her eye to try to stop the flow of tears. "I can remember feeling that way when I was your age. I wouldn't go back on being 14 or anything, not even with all these years I get back." The tears wouldn't stop. Millie looked at the window and tried to ignore Grandpa. He couldn't possibly understand. Nobody could understand. Especially people who got excited about Christmas sweaters and cookies and all that fake happy stuff they feel in their minds with to ward off their fear of death. Millie wasn't afraid of death right now. Death felt like her only friend. "My, we certainly are pickled, aren't we?" the voice said. "For someone who wants to end results, we're awfully fussy about how to achieve it. But there's a lot more options. I feel like a waiter taking my way through the menu at the fancy restaurant. The difference, of course, is that one menu gets you fed, the other menu gets you dead." Low rumbling laughter. Oh, I cracked myself up. Since I was talking about food, how about boiling? Did you know that Henry VII made boiling alive the official form of punishment during his reign? Funny that they call it boiling alive because goodness knows you don't stay alive for a very long time. But I could easily flood my insides with water, then use my energy stored to bring the temperature up, up, up. First, I would like to feel a nice warm bath, but then it would just keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter. I wonder if you turn red like a lobster. Millie sat miserably at her table in the cafeteria, knowing she was doomed to eat alone. She opened an anthology of horror stories she had checked down from the school library. Books, at least, would always keep her company. But then Dylan sat down across from her, acting like absolutely nothing was wrong. "Hey," he said. "How can you just sit across from me like that?" Millie said. He was so casual, opening up with his ketchup packets and creating a little red puddle on his plate, just like always. "Like what?" Dylan said, looking lost. "I sit here every day." "I would think you want to sit with Brooke," Millie said. "Brooke has a different lunch period than me," he said, obviously dipping a nugget in his ketchup puddle and dumped in his mouth. Millie felt anger rising up all the way from his toes. "So I'm what, your backup? Her understudy?" Dylan rubbed his face like he was tired. "I'm sorry, Millie. I'm trying to keep up. I really am, but you're not making any sense." Millie couldn't understand how he could be so stupid. "Dylan, I saw you with her at the Bazzers last night." "Yeah, so?" She had never felt so exasperated. "You were holding hands. You were clearly together." "Yeah, so?" he repeated, but the look of the realizing dawned on his face. "Wait, Millie, did you think you and I were dating?" Millie swallowed hard and told herself not to cry. "You noticed me, brought me a book, took me out for tea. Of course I thought we might in the future date, I mean." "Wow," Dylan said. "I'm sorry if I misled you. I mean, you were really great and really pretty and everything, but I never meant to make you think we were anything other than friends. Haven't you ever had a friend who's a boy but who's not, boyfriend?" Hannah has been Millie's only friend but had abandoned her. There was no way Millie was sharing this fact with Dylan. "Of course I have. But Dylan, you told me I was the only cool person you met at this school." "I did. But that was my first day. I met other cool people since then. Like Brooke." Millie's voice dripped in sarcasm. "What, you don't approve of Brooke?" Dylan said. "She's blonde and basic," Millie said. "No need to mimic words. The truth was the truth." "Have you ever had a conversation with her?" Dylan asked. "Do you even know what she's like?" Had Millie ever heard Brooke say anything? She was quiet in U.S. government class, Millie assumed, because she had nothing interesting or important to say. "I never talked to her," Millie said. "I don't talk to just anyone." Dylan shook his head. "Well, Brooke isn't just anyone. She's smart and well-read and nice. She wants to be a veterinarian. Why does it matter what color her hair is?" Dylan looked at her so hard it was like he was looking through her. "Millie, I'm disappointed in you. You, of all people, with your black wardrobe and black eyeliner and black nail polish. It seemed like you know better than to judge a person based on her appearance. You don't like when people do it to you, and yet you're guilty of the very same crime. I'm pretty sure that's called being hypocrite. He stood up. I think this conversation is over. As the winter holidays approached, Millie's mood became grimmer and grimmer. The cold temperatures and the gray skies and the stripped bare trees all matched her emotions straight perfectly. Cheerful holiday lights and plastic Santas on people's houses filled her with anger, and the sound of Christmas carols in stores and other public places enraged her. She felt like she couldn't be held responsible for her action if she had to hear Winter Wonderland one more time. Holiday cheer, peace of earth, and goodwill were just lies people told themselves. Winter was the season of death. At dinner, vegetable stir-fry for Millie. Chicken and vegetarian stir-fry for Grandpa. Grandpa said, "So are you excited for tomorrow's last day before winter's break?" "Not really," Millie said. "Listen, I've been meaning to tell you. I'm not celebrating Christmas this year." Grandpa's face fell. "Not celebrating Christmas? But whatever not?" Millie picked up a piece of broccoli with her fork. "I refuse to pretend to be happy for some particular day just because society tells me I'm supposed to be." "It's not about society, it's about family," Grandpa said. "It's about getting together and enjoying each other's company. On Christmas Eve, your aunt and uncle and cousins are coming over, and your mom and dad are going to Skype in so they can be a part of things. We'll have a big dinner and exchange gifts. Then we'll have hot cocoa and cookies, and play board games." Millie felt anxious at the thought of all the false cheers. I'll be here because I don't have any place else to go, and I refuse to participate in festivals." "Is that a fact?" Grandpa said. He pushed his plate away. "Listen, Millie, you've never been a particularly cheerful child. Heaven knows you were the fussiest baby I ever seen, and when you were a toddler, your temper tantrums were legendary. But I feel like you're especially unhappy here with me now, and I'm genuinely sorry for that. I'm an old man, and I'm no expert at what young girls like, but I try to make things as nice for you as I can. Maybe it would be better if you had choose to move aboard with your mom and dad. I know it must be hard to be so far away from them." "I don't miss my parents," Millie shouted. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure if it was true. Sure, they made her crazy sometimes when they were together, but it was weird having them so far away, and Skyping with them on Sunday nights wasn't nearly enough to make it up for their absence from her everyday life. And then helped that she didn't tend to be in a bad mood during their Skype sessions. Mad at them for being long, and so their conversation wasn't always pleasant. "Okay, maybe you don't," Grandpa said, "but something's been eating you lately. Maybe a problem at school, or a falling out with a friend. I'm not saying I could help, but sometimes it helps to just someone to listen." Against her will, a picture of Dylan popped in her head. Dylan, the first day she met him when she couldn't believe this cool new guy, who was sat anywhere he wanted in the cafeteria, chose to sit right across from her. Well, that never happened anymore. Now he sat at the table with those guys who never talk about anything but fantasy role-playing games, and Millie sat alone with her own lonely a book for a companion. "I told you I don't have any friends," Millie said. "Well, maybe you should try and make a new one," Grandpa said. "You don't have to be a social butterfly if you don't want to, but everyone needs a good friend." "You don't know what I need." Millie stood up from the table. "I'm going to do my homework." She didn't really have homework since tomorrow was the last day before break, but she said whatever she had to get out of there. "And I'm going to my workshop," Grandpa said. "And you're not the only one who can storm out of the room, you know, girlie." It was the first time since she had moved in with her grandpa that he sounded like he was actually mad at her. In her room, Millie opened her laptop, went to YouTube and typed in Court Carson music videos. She clicked on Death Mask, her favorite song. The video was filled with images of ravens and bats encircling vultures. In the center of it all was Carson himself, growling his way through the morbid lyrics, his black hair spiky, his complex palette, his black iron perfectly applied. Millie felt like Carl Carson might be the only person on the planet who would have understood her. Who was she kidding? Nobody could. "Please don't boil me alive," Millie said. She had to figure out a way to escape. Suddenly, desperation wanted to live. "Not boiling? Well, understandable. Of all accounts, it is a nasty way to go. People who observed boiling during Henry's time said it was so sickening they would have preferred to see a beheading." "Oh, that's a good one we haven't talked about yet. Decapitation," he said like it was such a happy word. "There are so many ways to chop off a head, of course. And if the blade is sharp enough, it's fairly quick and painless. That being said, if the blade isn't sharp enough, well, poor Mary, Queen of Scots, had to get 3 hacks with a headman's dull old axe before her noggin was liberated from her body. The guillotine was quick and clean, though, but didn't require any particular skill on the part of execution, which made it easy to get rid of all those rich snobs during the French Revolution. They just lined them up and ran them through like a guillotine like an assembly line, or rather, a disassembly line." The voice paused again to chuckle. Whatever it was, it seemed to be having a very good time at Millie's expense. Saudi Arabia, where your parents are, am I right? Still use beheading as their preferred form of capital punishment. They use a sword, which I find rarely stylish and dramatic. Sunan Arabia, Millie thought. Her parents were so far away, so unable to help her, and now she was facing down death. She strangely felt more love for them than she ever had. Sure, they would weird and make strange decisions and stupid mistakes, but she knew they loved her. She thought of her dad's awful jokes and her mom's reading her story after story at bedtime when she was little. Maybe her parents were different from other kids' parents, but they had always taken care of her basic needs. And they had always made her feel loved and safe. Millie wanted to be safe. Millie, at least come downstairs and say hello, Grandpa called up the stairs. It was Christmas Eve, and Grandpa had been blasting Christmas music all day long, singing Silver Bells and White's Christmas, and others of Millie's least favorite off-key in the kitchen, while he baked the ham and decorated the cookies. From the level of noise downstairs, Millie assumed that her aunt and uncle and cousins had arrived. The fact did not fill her with joy. Nothing did. Millie reluctantly dragged herself downstairs. They were gathered around the antique glass punch bowl that Grandpa had dug out from who knows where in the house, full of stuff. They were wearing Christmas sweaters, all of them, even her annoying little cousins. Aunt Sherry had on some wearable abomination with a reindeer that had light-up nose. Uncle Rob, her dad's goofy brother, wore a red sweater with candy canes on it, and Cameron and Hayden wore matching elf sweaters. It was all so hideous that Millie feared her eyes would bleed. "Merry Christmas!" Aunt Sherry greeted her, opening her arms for a hug. Millie did not move towards her. "Hello," she said, her voice dripping icing. "Off to a funeral, Millie?" Uncle Rob said, nodding towards her to head and toe, back in purple clothing. He had always said this to her and apparently never stopped finding it hilarious. "I wish," Millie said. "Better to be in an honest, sad environment than a fake happy one." And she would certainly prefer funeral organ music to being forced to listen to Winter Wonderland again. "Millie isn't celebrating Christmas this year," Grandpa said, "but at least she's agreed to grace us with her presence." "How can you not want to celebrate Christmas?" Hayden said, looking up at Millie with big, innocent blue eyes. "Christmas is awesome." He had a little lisp that came out when he said Christmas and awesome, which Millie supposed some people find it cute. "And presents are awesome," Cameron said, pumping his fist in the excitement. Both kids were so hyper, it was like their parents had poured them full of black coffee. Millie wondered if there had been a time where she got this excited over the holiday, or whether she had always known better. "Our culture is already too materialistic," Millie said. "Why do you want more stuff?" Her aunt and uncle and cousins all looked uncomfortable. Good. Somebody in this family needed to tell the truth. Sherry blasted a smile on her face. "Millie, won't you just at least have a cup of eggnog?" "Drinking eggnog is like drinking penicillin," Millie said. "Really, how had such a disgusting beverage become a part of any traditional celebration? Eggnog and fruitcake both seem more like they should be part of a punishment rather than a celebration." "What pelgmin?" Hayden asked. "It's that gross slimy stuff that's in your throat and nose when you have a cold," Aunt Sherry said. Cameron raised his cup. "Yep, eggnog," he said, then took a sip, showing drink that left an eggy mustache on his upper lip. Millie couldn't take it. She had to get out of here. "I'm going for a walk," she said. "Can we come too?" Hayden asked. "No," Millie said. "I need to be alone." "Well, don't stray too far," Grandpa said. "We're eating dinner in an hour." As Millie headed out the door, Grandpa called for her to remember her coat, but she ignored him. All the houses in the neighborhood had extra cars in their driveway, no doubt because of visiting family members celebrating the holidays. All these people acting the same, doing the same thing, presents and eggnog and hypocrisy. Well, Millie was different, and she wasn't going to participate. Hypocrisy, she thought again, and this time the word stung her. Dylan had said she was a hypocrite because she judged Brooke by her appearance. But boys, even boys who seemed cool like Dylan, were fooled by appearances. If a conveniently pretty blonde girl paid any attention to them, they'll think she was a saint and a genius rolled into one. No way was Millie a hypocrite. She was the truth-teller, and if some people couldn't handle the truth, that was their problem. Another one lap around the block, she was feeling pretty cold, but there was no way she was going back in the house yet. An idea popped in her head. Grandpa's workshop had a little space here he always keeps running. It could keep her toasty warm while she waited for out the party. He was too busy hosting this lame little holiday gathering to go into his workshop. It was a perfect place to hide. Grandpa kept the key under the flower pot beside the workshop door. Millie found it, opened the door, and pulled the chain on the bar light bulb that lit the small, windowless space. She closed the door behind her and looked around. The place was even more cramped with stuff than it had been the last time she was here. Grandpa really must have been hitting the yard sales, flea markets, and savage yards. Near his workbench was a rusty, antique bicycle, the kind with a giant front wheel and a tiny back one. There were lots of old mechanical toys too. A metal bank with a clown that flipped coins into its mouth. A jack-in-the-box that startled her when the jester doll inside jumped out. Even though she knew that would happen when she was turning the crank, there was even one of those horrible grinning monkey dolls that Jang Campbell's together. Shambles together. Why did Grandpa want all this stuff? And what did he plan to do with it? Repair it and then use it to clutter the house some more, she guessed. The strangest item among the many was tucked into one corner of the workshop. It was some kind of mechanical bear with a bow tie, top hat, and creepy black grin. It looked like it once had been white and pink, but years of neglect had left it a dingy gray. It was big, big enough for a person to climb into its body cavity, like in those science fiction movies when people drove giant robots. The hinges on its limbs made it look like as if had once moved. It must have been a figure from one of those old kids' attractions that feature creepy-looking animatronics. Why had little kids ever liked things that were nightmare-inducing? From outside the workshop, Millie heard laughter and yelling. Hayden and Cameron playing in the backyard. She hadn't thought to lock the workshop door from the inside. What if they try to come in? She couldn't let them find her. They'll go tell the adults, and then she'll be dragged back in the house and sentenced to mandatory celebration. Millie found herself staring at the old animatronic bear, not just a curiosity now, but as a potential solution to her problem. She opened the door to the mechanical bear's body cavity, crawled inside, and shut the door behind her. Darkness enveloped her. It was so much better than those annoyingly twinkle lights and garish, bright Christmas sweaters. This was perfect. No one can find her here. She can go back to the house after she heard Uncle Rob and Aunt Sherry's car pulling out of the driveway. So what if she missed Skyping with her parents? It serves them right for being so far away from her on Christmas. Kids, time for Christmas dinner, Grandpa called out of the back door. Millie, you come in too, if you can hear me. Cameron and Hayden came running in, their cheeks pink from the chilly air. It smells great in here, Cameron said. Well, that's because I cooked for you a feast, Grandpa said. Ham and sweet potatoes and rolls and your mom's great green bean casserole. You boys didn't happen to see Millie while you were out there, did you? Nope, didn't see her, Hayden said. Grandpa, why is she so weird? Grandpa chuckled. She's 14. You'll be weird when you're 14, too. Now go wash your hands before we sit down and eat. At the table, Grandpa carved a big, sticking, beautiful ham. I gazed this thing with Coca-Cola, he said. Found a recipe on the internet. I've been looking up a lot of recipes since Millie moved in. Most of them vegetarian so she won't starve herself to death. I bought this weird, fake turkey loaf thing for her at the grocery store. When she gets back, she can have it with the green bean casserole and sweet potatoes. I keep feeling like we ought to go and look for her. Siri said, oh, she'll show up when she gets hungry or when she feels like she made a point. Grandpa said, she and the cat of hers aren't that different. She's just at that age, you know. Now, speaking of hungry, who wants some ham? I don't have a sword like a Siberian executor, silly Millie, the voice said. But I do have a sharp sheet of metal I could pass through the chamber. It could pass at the level of your throat, or it could hit you lower and beseak you. And the bisection is a sure way to go, too. Either way, the job wouldn't get done. I think it would be smooth like Madame Guillotine instead of a slow doll hacking like Mary. Queen of Scots experience. But I'm not 100% sure. This will be my first attempt of decapitation. Yours, too. But also be your last. As the voice laughed at his latest witticisms, Millie pushed on the walls of the chamber that trapped her. They didn't bulge, but then she saw a tiny creak of light shining through the side of the door. Maybe she could slip something, a tool of sort, into the crack. She could somehow pry the door open, but what could she use as a tool? She took a mental survey of her jewelry. Her earrings were too small and breakable, and her necklace was an unhelpful string of jet spans. But there was a silver cuffing bracelet in her wrist. She pulled it off and pushed and bent until it was nearly right ruler straight. The end seemed like the right size to slip in the crack of the door, but she was too afraid to test it, too worried that her captor would notice. Millie, the voice said, are you still with me? A decision must be made. Millie thought. If she lowered her head and curled up into a small ball, when the blade shot through, it would miss her. She had to be quick, though, and make sure she got her whole head out of the way, or else she'd get scalped. If the blade came through the lower to bisect her, she'll really have to flatten out in the bottom of the small space. Is there any chance you would just let me go? She asked. Anything I could give you to exchange for my life? Lamb chop. There's nothing I want from you except your life. Millie took a deep breath. Okay, decapitation it is. Really? The voice sounded tremendously pleased. Good choice. It's a classic. I promise you won't be disappointed. The low, rumbling laugh. You won't be disappointed because you'll be dead. Millie felt more tears spring to her eyes. She had to be strong, but she could still cry and be strong at the same time. Tell me when you're about to do it, okay? Don't just spring on me. Fair enough, I suppose. It's not like you're going anywhere. Give me a few seconds to get ready. You know what they say. Prior preparation prevents poor performance. The chamber shook and rattled, and the animatronic's eye rolled back onward, away from the chamber. Millie waited. Her heart pounded. Why had she ever wished for death? No matter how hard life could be, how depressing and disappointing, she wanted to live. If nothing else, she wanted the chance to apologize to Dylan for what she said about Brooke and to ask if they could be friends again. She curled into a tiny a ball as she could, tucking her head under her arms. She hoped harder than she ever hoped for anything that she was low enough to miss the blade. Millicent Fritzman, you are hereby sentenced to die for crimes of humanity. Wait, Millie said. What does that mean, crimes against humanity? You, the voice said, have been rude and quick to anger. You have rushed to the judgment of others. You have been insensitively grateful to those who had shown you nothing but love and kindness. The voice was right. Different indices of her own rudeness and ingratefulness played in her hand, like scenes from a movie she didn't want to see. Guilty as charged, Millie said. But why are those crimes I have to die for? Those are crimes that everyone's guilty from time to time. True, the voice said. That's why they're crimes of humanity. But if there's something all humans are guilty of, then why do I have to die for them? The voice didn't answer, and Millie felt a small tingle of hope. Maybe she wouldn't have to take her chance by curling up to a floor in the cavity. Maybe she could talk herself out of this yet. Because, the voice said, you're the one who crawled into my belly. Whimpering, Millie made herself as small as she possibly could in the bottom of the cavity. If she got out, she was going to make it a point to be nicer to Grandpa. He really had been good to her, taking her in and putting up with her moods and teaching himself how to cook all those vegetarian recipes. In the spirit of the French Revolution, the voice said, I will now do the countdown in French before releasing the blade. Un, deux, trois. Quick as a shot, the blades sliced through the chamber. Grandpa brought out platters, sugar cookies, and set them on the coffee table. I'll be right back with the hot cocoa, he said, in the kitchen. He finally broke down and called Millie's cell number. Her phone rang from the pocket of her jacket that was hanging on the cocktail on the hall. Oh well, she would come back when she felt like she proved her point. He hated to think about her being outside without a jacket, though. It was pretty chilly out there. Grandpa poured 5 cups of hot coffee and topped them even with a generous handful of mini marshmallows. He carried the steaming cups on the tray in the living room. Who's ready for presents? He called. I am, Cameron shouted. I am, Hayden shouted even louder. Do you think we should wait for Millie? Siri asked. She's not celebrating Christmas, remember? Rob said. Why should we wait for her if she's decided to be a brat? Grandpa didn't like the word brat being used to describe Millie. She wasn't a bad kid. She was just at a difficult age. She would come around. He crouched under the Christmas tree and arranged all her presents in a big pile so they'd be there for her when she came back.